Hello horror movie lovers, I'm Trenton and I love movies just like you, obviously. So I watched The Nun because people always say that my purity and innocence is very off-putting. They're just like, oh, you're so nice and so pure, I wish I was you. My expectations were moderate. I remember this movie getting so much backlash around the time it was first released, people saying that it's the worst Conjuring universe movie, and every time I heard that statement, I was always intrigued to watch the movie even more, but I'm just now getting around to actually watching it. 6 years later. But did the movie meet my expectations? Yeah, I thought the movie was fine. It's very much overhated. Like, there's no way people are saying that this is the worst movie in the Conjuring universe. Like, have you not seen the movie that shall not be named? Like, I'm sorry. As of right now, this is the lowest rated Conjuring universe movie on Letterboxd. Like, how the do people think this is worse than the movie that shall not be named? There is no way. Unreliable.
Everyone's entitled to one good scare.
A priest with a haunting past and a novice on the threshold of her final vows are sent by the Vatican to investigate the death of a young nun in Romania and confront a malevolent force in the form of a demonic nun. The first third of this video will be spoiler free, then the last 2/3 will contain spoilers. Don't worry, I will give you a warning before we enter spoiler territory. The characters weren't interesting at all. Really? I feel like with the previous Conjuring universe movies, there's at least one or multiple characters that you somewhat care for, but in this movie, I didn't really care for any of them. Sister Irene was okay. There really wasn't anything necessarily special about her. She's nice, kind, sweet, etc. And at first I did like her character, but then I realized that that was really only because she's played by Taissa Farmiga. And I love her, but when it came to the character herself, not the actress, I just wasn't able to fully latch onto her character for some reason. I felt like there wasn't anything interesting enough about her to get attached. Father Burke wasn't anything special either. He's the good priest in the religious horror movie, but I couldn't fully latch on to him either. Valak was cool, though I feel she was a little inconsistent when it came to how intimidating she was throughout the movie. Sometimes I found her to not be that intimidating. Still terrifying, don't get me wrong. She was terrifying the entire movie, but there were just some moments where I was intimidated by her, then some moments where I wasn't as intimidated, and I can't really say why, at least in the spoiler-free section. The story is different for the Conjuring universe. It's not centered around a family or a large group of children. It's really only centered around two people, both being in the religious field. I like the story. I think it was refreshing for the Conjuring universe. The story itself isn't really anything special or different in a general sense, but I did appreciate that they wanted to switch up the setting and overall story for this movie to distinguish itself from the previous Conjuring universe movies so far. The writing is okay, though the movie still feels like a Conjuring universe movie. Very obvious jump scares and jump scare setups and just everything being pretty predictable for the most part. I will say that I love the cinematography in this movie. Just the overall gothic atmosphere in this castle that's surrounded by woods and it's gloomy and foggy. It's so relaxing to look at. Like, I wish I could stay here without an entity that's more evil than me trying to kill me. The movie felt contained in the sense that there's only two main characters, but also felt pretty wide scale since we're in this giant castle that's surrounded by the woods. So that also felt very different compared to the previous films in the universe as well. But again, the Conjuring universe never really has any problems when it comes to cinematography and how the movie looks visually besides the movie that shall not be named. Some of the effects in this movie are pretty gnarly, way gnarlier than I was expecting. Obviously, Annabelle Creation did have moments that were on the gorier side, but this one also had a few of those moments as well that I appreciated. But there also are some VFX moments that are a little questionable, but I honestly didn't really mind them in the moment. The tone is dark. When it came to the atmosphere, when it came to the subject matter overall, it was just dark, and the stakes did feel somewhat high since there weren't any recurring protagonists from the previous movies in this movie. Therefore, since there isn't any familiar, friendly faces, there wasn't that automatic sense of plot armor that you get from watching the mainline Conjuring movie so far, or the Conjuring universe movies centered around children so far. The pacing would definitely be my biggest complaint for the movie. It's the shortest movie out of the entire Conjuring universe so far at around 96 minutes, but it still felt pretty long and felt like it dragged. I just feel like the pace in which all the scares and or important events happened was a little inconsistent. To be honest, I just felt bored watching the movie. That's pretty much my only complaint. Boredom. The life lesson that I learned after after watching The Nun was that my purity and innocence is so beautiful. Overall, I don't really see why this movie gets as much hate as it does. I didn't really think it was that bad. The only flaw that the movie really had was that it was just boring, but arguably all the Conjuring universe movies are boring. So I feel like that's not really saying a lot. I'm gonna give The Nun a 5 out of 10. Didn't love it, but definitely didn't hate it. We are now entering spoiler territory. If you haven't seen The Nun, watch it, then come back to the video, or if you simply don't care about spoilers, keep on watching. In this portion of the video, I break down the movie, go more in depth with my likes and dislikes, as well as my favorite scene, least favorite scene, favorite kill, and least favorite kill. Again, we are now entering spoiler territory. In 1952 Romania, 2 nuns living at the St. Carthas monastery are attacked by an unseen evil force. The surviving nun, Sister Victoria, flees from the attacker, a demon appearing as a nun, and hangs herself. Her body is discovered by Frenchie, a villager who transports supplies to the nuns. The Vatican sends Father Burke with Sister Irene, a nun in her novitiate, to Romania to investigate. The pair meets Frenchie, discover Victoria's body, and take a key from her corpse. Inside the abbey, they meet the abbess, who informs them that the nuns observed silence during the night, so they need to return the next day. That night, Burke is rescued by Irene after being buried alive in the graveyard by the demonic entity. The next day, Irene and Burke return to the abbey, but only Irene can enter as it is cloistered. She meets the other nuns and learns that they are praying constantly, swapping in shifts to keep the entity at bay. The abbey was built in the Dark Ages as a castle for the Duke of St. Carta, a powerful aristocrat obsessed with the occult. The Duke summoned the demon through a rift in the catacombs but was killed by Christian knights, who sealed the rift with a vial filled with the blood of Christ. However, the bombings during World War II reopened the rift, unleashing the entity. Burke identifies the demon as Valak and discovers the abbess has been dead all along. Irene is attacked by Valak and joins the nuns in prayer to ward it off. When she reunites with Burke and Frenchie, she discovers that none of the nuns she had seen and talked to were real and she had been praying alone. Sister Victoria had in fact been the last nun in that abbey and had sacrificed herself to stop Valak from possessing her, theorizing that Valak can only be stopped if they seal the rift again with the blood of Christ from the reliquary, the same way the knights did. The trio retrieves the vial with Victoria's key. Irene asks Burke to elevate her status to a professed nun, which he does. In the tunnel, she is possessed by Valak, but Frenchie smears the blood of Christ on her face, casting out the demon. Valak starts to drown her in a flooded chamber. Irene, who had kept some of Christ's blood from the vial in her mouth, spits it into the demon's face, banishing it as the rift is sealed. Frenchie resuscitates Irene and reveals his real name is Maurice. Unbeknownst to the others, during the attack, Maurice was possessed by Valak. 20 years later, at a university seminar in Wakefield, Massachusetts, Carolyn Perrin watches as Ed and Lorraine Warren present footage of their attempt to exorcise a possessed older Maurice. Maurice grabs Lorraine, showing her a vision of Ed dying, which initiates the Warrens' investigation of the Perrin farmhouse haunting. Then the movie ends. The third act of the movie was certainly a third act. Sister Irene ultimately defeating Valak by spitting the blood of Jesus into her face was hilarious and so religious. I did find it to be a tad bit underwhelming. I was just hoping that the movie would redeem itself or at least make up for how boring the movie was in the first 2 acts, but it didn't, unfortunately. I was fully not expecting the movie to show the aftermath of Sister Victoria from the opening of the movie. I was genuinely shocked at how graphic it was for a Conjuring universe movie. Her body just hanging there with crows picking at her corpse definitely wasn't on my Conjuring universe bucket list. I appreciated it. I feel like the opening of this movie perfectly set the tone. It was so dark, so intriguing, and I just wish that the movie lived up to the opening scene as the movie progressed, but I feel like it honestly didn't. I'm stuck between 2 scenes being my favorite from the movie, either the opening or the graveyard coffin scene with Father Burke. I found both scenes to genuinely be so good and effective, but I'd have to say the opening was my favorite scene of the movie. The only reason it's not the graveyard coffin scene was because I liked how the scene started with him getting attacked, falling into the grave, the camera tilting up to the tombstone that has his name on it, then zooming out to show that the grave was actually filled. The overwhelming amount of anxiety that I got from that scene was insane, but when he actually was in the coffin is where I feel this scene wasn't as effective, since Valak, or whoever that was, because it didn't look like Valak, but he got attacked by Valak in snake form not too long before he got trapped in here, so I assume that was Valak. Anyways, whatever entity was in there with him didn't kill him, even though they 100% could have. I mean, they were stuck in a damn coffin under the ground, and you're telling me they can only grab his face? You could have easily killed him. It just started to feel like every other Conjuring universe movie in the sense that the stakes did start to feel pretty low, since Valak, or whatever that thing was, just so happens not to be be able to kill him. Even though he's very much in reach, the coffin graveyard scene would have been so much better if he actually got killed by Valak in the coffin. Sister Irene was trying to save him by digging up the grave while the bell kept ringing. She's finally able to open the coffin and the bell stops ringing right as she opens it, but when she does, Father Burke is already dead as hell in there, which would have implied that Valak was the one ringing the bell to get Sister Irene's attention and basically threaten her. I think that would have been more effective. But like I said literally a second ago, I think the opening is so good and set the tone and atmosphere perfectly for the movie. There really isn't much else to say. I just think the opening of the movie was perfect. My least favorite scene would have to be any uninteresting, slow dialogue scene. Again, I found the movie to be pretty boring, unfortunately, due to the overall pace of the movie. It just felt like a lot of filler and exposition dumping, and I really wasn't fucking with it. My favorite kill would have to be Sister Victoria in the opening. Again, I've said this I don't even know how many times at this point. It was so dark, so effective, and perfectly set the tone and the atmosphere, and just the fact that we saw the aftermath of her death and the crows picking at her corpse was so refreshing to see. There's like 6 off-screen kills, so I could really pick any of them, but I guess Sister Owana, I mean, yeah, bloody eyes holding a cross. And I know her zombified corpse does come back and get set on fire by Maurice and Father Burke, but I'm not gonna count her second death. I'm gonna count her first. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more videos from me, and make sure to hit that notification bell so you'll be notified whenever I post a new video. Alright, horror movie lovers, I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace out.